get the perspective now from former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. It's good to have you, sir. Thank you. You've said that Donald Trump can help achieve a deal. His special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is headed to Doha this week. Are you confident that Trump will get a ceasefire deal this week and that any ceasefire will be a lasting one?
No, I certainly am not confident. I'm confident that if President Trump wants to force Prime Minister Netanyahu to accept the only possible deal, he can do it. And the only possible deal is very simple, to be very open. The Hamas will not make a deal unless they will have a guarantee that the war is over. And they will then probably release all the hostages, and there will be a release of Palestinian prisoners, part of an agreement, and it will go from there. Israel doesn't want to end the war, so there is not a meeting point between these two opposing positions. And I don't trust very much the process going on now in Qatar. I'm sure that all the parties involved are making a certain effort to reach an agreement, but finally it really depends on the president. If the president will decide to use his authority and to exercise it in a very explicit manner, saying to Netanyahu, just the end has come and you have to stop the war now, so that the hostages will be released and a ceasefire agreement will be achieved. If he will decide to do it, I am almost certain that he can do it.
That's interesting, and we are not party to those private conversations at this point, but certainly it seems as if the pressure is there from the White House. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir is insisting on an end to these ceasefire talks following the deaths and injuries of Israeli soldiers in Gaza over the past 24 hours or so. We know the far-right coalition is vehemently opposed to any deal. They want to see the complete decimation of Hamas and continued occupation of Gaza. And they've threatened to collapse the Netanyahu government in the past. How will the far right factor into negotiations this time around? You've talked about ultimately this sort of being in the hands of Donald Trump. There is also the pressure on Netanyahu, of course, the counter pressure from the far right coalition. What's your sense of how they factor in this time?
Yeah, the presentation you made makes it almost inevitable to say that there is now a competition between President Trump and Minister Ben-Gvir. Who will have the ultimate power to force Netanyahu to take his line, Ben-Gvir or President Trump? I know it sounds a little bit ridiculous and somewhat childish maybe that we make this kind of presentation or confrontation, but this is it. Netanyahu is captive of these right-wing, messianic, extremist, fundamentalist, terrorist groups that are now controlling his government. And there were many Israelis, including the most prominent former Israeli soldiers, warriors, commanders of the Israeli army, Mossad, Secret Service, all of the great generals that keep saying there is no objective to a military operation at this point after 21 months of fighting in Gaza that is worth the cost. 5 Israeli soldiers were killed yesterday. The life of the hostages are uncertain. We don't know whether they will survive this process. And also there are many Palestinians not involved which are killed as part of this process without any objective that worth the cost. So there is one line of pressure coming from the political factions in the cabinet which really want to deport all of the Gazans years, and in order to clean Gaza for the eventual resettlement of Israelis. And it seems that at this point, the Prime Minister is entirely dependent on them to the degree that he is doing what they want. And that many Israelis, many Israelis condemn the Prime Minister for waging a war which is in the purpose or in the service of his political interest rather than the real national security interest of the State of Israel. On the other hand, there is the voice of reason, of responsibility.
Can I just stop you there? Can I just stop
Trump.
Yeah, let me just stop you there for 1 moment, sir. Yeah, let me stop you there because I'm really interested in these political aspirations. Is there a world in which Benjamin Netanyahu gets this deal done under pressure from Donald Trump, if that's what we agree is the issue here, gets this deal done for a 60-day pause to fighting, calls for snap elections, builds a new coalition of centrists, doesn't need the far right in a coalition, and goes and wins that election? Is that realistic? And is that a government that you would support?
Well, of course, it depends on what will be the specific makeup of this government, but I assess, no one should talk with complete certainty, but I think that if Netanyahu will now accept the advice of President Trump and will make an agreement, will end the war, and will embark on a meaningful process of negotiations with the Palestinians towards a two-state solution for a comprehensive political solution of this historic conflict, and will then go to elections, I think there is a likelihood that he will end up with impressive support from the Israeli constituents. So the question is, what is Netanyahu after? Is he after a greater Israel? Is he after deporting the Gazans? Is he after continuing the war? Is he after losing the hostages? Is he after maybe causing the deaths of many non-involved Palestinians? Is he after of expelling the West Bankers, the Palestinians West Bankers, in order to allow the settlement movement of Ben Gvir and Smotrich to settle more and more in the West Bank? Or is he after peace? If he is after peace, he should listen to President Trump, because I believe that President Trump wants peace. I heard that Netanyahu prepared a wonderful gift to President Trump, and he recommended him to be awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. I think that if Trump will indeed force his opinion on Netanyahu, he will certainly deserve a peace prize. Question is whether when Netanyahu recommends to the Nobel Peace Committee someone for the Nobel Prize for Peace, is this a recommendation that will help him, or perhaps will do the opposite?
I want you to have a listen then to what Benjamin Netanyahu said in DC yesterday when asked about a future Palestinian state. Have a listen.
We'll work out a peace with our Palestinian neighbors, those who don't want to destroy us, and we'll work out a peace in which our security, the sovereign power of security, always remains in our hands. Now, people will say it's not a complete state, it's not a state, it's not that. We don't care.
So he's basically saying, no state. Well, then what?
Of course. I think I said it already, that Netanyahu prefers his political priorities and political interest, unfortunately, regrettably, over the national interest of the State of Israel. One must understand something, and it has to be very clear. There will never, ever be a political solution to the historic conflict between Israel and the Palestinians unless it will be on the basis of two states. Palestinians have a right to exercise self-determination, and we have to stop being occupiers. We have to separate from them. And there is a plan which I presented with the President of the Palestinian Authority many years ago when I was Prime Minister, and since then I negotiated it with many Palestinians, including recently I published a joint statement with the former Foreign Minister of the Palestinian Authority and the former UN Ambassador of the Palestinian Authority and the nephew of Arafat, in which we jointly recommend ending the war in Gaza along the parameters which were proposed by President Biden and President Trump, and also embarking on negotiations for a two-state solution. This is something that can be done. If Netanyahu doesn't want to make peace, then it should be clear that he doesn't want to make peace, because Israel has the power, has the strength in order to defend itself, even if there is a Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel. There is no question about it.